Good morning and welcome to the second day of Arize Observe. We want to welcome you to the Advancing Your Skills stage here at Observe. We're delighted to have you join us today for an exciting and insightful session on cracking the ML interview, tips and tricks for your next role in tech. In this session, we aim to help aspiring machine learning professionals prepare for their upcoming, interviews and land that next dream job in the tech and ML industry. Today, we'll be engaging in some interactive Q&A conversation. Claire and myself will try to share some of the valuable insights that we've learned, along in our own ML journeys, and also answer any of the questions you may have kind of live. Together, myself and Claire will delve into the intricacies of, what does the ML process look like? What does the data scientist, what does the data science interview generally, have, and what does it make up? We'll discuss key skills and qualities that top companies look for in candidates, and show practical tips, tricks to help you ace your next tech interview. So expect a super conversational session with ample opportunities for Q&A. So feel free to participate and ask questions. So without further ado, let me give a warm welcome to my partner, Claire Longo.
Yeah, thanks, Dat. Really excited to be here and have this open conversation and get questions from the group here. A little background on me. I'm Claire Longo. I'm customer success here at Arize. Prior to Arize, I was an engineering manager, very much on like the engineering MLOps side of things. And before that, I was a data scientist. And I really moved into engineering because as a data scientist, I got really passionate about seeing my models in production, seeing them work, and really kind of dove into like solving those problems. So I've done a lot of interviews. I've interviewed as a data scientist, as an engineer, and really excited to just kind of share what I've learned, what I did wrong, what worked well there. But Dat, maybe before we jump in, a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Dat Ngo. I'm a ML solutions architect here at Arize. And so was a data scientist for a long time, was a software engineer for a little bit, but actually my journey into AI and ML was kind of an odd one. It wasn't like the standard. I had a computer science degree, and I actually had a degree in kind of a completely different space in the energy sector, and really decided that I wanted to get into AI and ML. I saw the growth of how data was just exponentially growing. So I'm sure there's I do notice the same thing, that there's a lot of data scientists from many different fields. So if you are indeed one of those people who feel, because I know at the beginning I felt like I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Maybe I'm not, good enough, or I don't have the background for this. But just realize that some of the best data scientists, machine learning engineers I've ever met, don't come from a standard background. So realize that's actually to your advantage. It allows you to think kind of differently. So that's my background. I've done data scientists for a long time in kind of maybe less enterprisey, more startup kind of realm. So definitely more kind of a scrappy data scientist that has to kind of do everything. But that's a little bit about me. And so kind of with that, I'll kind of get us kicked off. And so, Claire, when you're interviewing for data science candidates, what are kind of the first things that you look for right off the bat for like first impressions? What are the things that, you're kind of gauging for right off the bat before you kind of get deeper into the kind of interview?
Yeah, so are you asking like from being like on the hiring manager side, what I'm looking for in the candidates?
Yeah, so you've sat on both sides. So I was just curious, when
Yeah.
you're coming into an interview, what are the things like first off the bat you want to give an impression of? And then as someone who has hired, what are the things you're looking for?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think as a hiring manager, one thing that really stands out and makes that candidate kind of stand out in a unique way is going to be enthusiasm. Like data science is a really broad field, so is machine learning engineering. There's so much like different use cases where we can apply this. And one thing that really stands out is when a candidate is really passionate about a certain use case or even like a certain model type, like just really showing that deep interest and excitement can definitely make you stand out and complement just like having that strong skill set as well. And then, so as a candidate, when I'm interviewing, I'm looking a lot at the use case. Is it something that inspires me? Am I going to be like super leaned in and excited to understand what it's like to be like a stakeholder or a user in that situation? I'm also looking at mentorship and leadership. I think your boss might end up being the most important person in your life, in your work life at least, and making sure that you've got a good relationship with that person, that their leadership style matches your like learning style. One thing that I think is really important to do is just ask that person, what is their management style? And not everyone is for everyone, but there's always someone for everyone. So just kind of gauging if their management style kind of matches your working style and if you can see like potential good collaboration there.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely the enthusiasm part is I love that first part.
Yeah, don't be afraid to just like show what you're passionate about. That always lands well. And I'm curious to hear from you, like when you get into these interview loops for data science or machine learning, what does that process really look like? Like, what are you being tested on? What are kind of the core interview tracks that exist here?
Yeah, that's a good one. So, what are I guess the if I distill that question down, it's like what are the key skills interviewers look for in DS and ML candidates? Yeah, it's a very nuanced question. I feel like it depends who the person is. Everyone has such a different style of interviewing. If you're interviewing for a startup, it's going to look very different than if you're interviewing for a very like established, think one of the big tech companies here in the Bay. But I would say I'm going to give like the kind of overview answer, and then maybe I'll go into some nuances. But I think interviewers typically look for a mix of technical skills along with problem solving abilities, and then also just as importantly, communication skills. Technical skills would be things like, oh, like how is your Python, or how are you good? Are you good with like data manipulation or visualization? What's your stats intuition like? Do you know the basic ML algorithms? And they probably also want to look at relevant experience with some of those libraries like NumPy, sklearn, TensorFlow, Pandas, etc. When it comes to the problem solving abilities, so going past the technical skills, I really think critical thinking is one of those really it's one of those really like ineffable things to explain, but when someone has it. So different people have many different ways of testing this, but it's really the ability to work with ambiguity, right?
Mm, yeah.
It's super important because when you think about the problems that you will solve in this space, the most like 9 times out of 10, they're super ambiguous. You get some sort of like, hey, we as a business need X, Y, or Z. So really, how well do they think critically? How autonomous can they be in problem solving?
Yeah.
Super useful. Don't get me wrong; it's important to always have some sort of guidance when you're kind of getting started off, and really good coaching. So I think one really important thing is realizing how your future manager or how you like to be coached is also just as important. So do you want somebody to give you the answer, or do you like when they give kind of little breadcrumbs to help you solve the answer and kind of make you grow? And then the final kind of aspect as far as key skills that I think are super important are how effectively do you communicate? Part of our job is being practitioners is not everybody understands the technical side, especially on the business side. So you have to be able to communicate your results and insights, and more importantly, why is what you're doing very important. Because if you can't really do that, then the business may not see the value that you bring, and then ultimately scrap a project. Or so I really think communicating to non-technical stakeholders is pretty crucial for success. So that's kind of my take on it. But everyone's going to be super different in how they interview. Every manager, every company has a different maybe culture or kind of what they prefer. So definitely always just being upfront with like who you are and what and who they are is always really a good place to start. But really love that question, Claire. And so maybe we can both tackle this one, Claire. So Marcus has asked in the chat, what are your thoughts on eye-catching portfolios,
Mm,
portfolio projects for actually landing the interview in the first place?
good question. We
Yeah.
didn't start at step zero. No, that's great. Let me take the first pass of this one. I love having a GitHub portfolio because I know it might be some work to curate, but if you have some personal projects that you can get up on your GitHub and showcase, or even a personal website, you're giving people a sample of your real code. And this gives hiring managers opportunity to really pull back some layers here and look at your code before you're even in the interview. And it's such a great indicator of what your strengths might be. And I see people who have like a really well-developed like personal website. Maybe they've got blog posts, some educational material, and or the GitHub. I think that those can really just show some like maturity around like a portfolio as well as your resume.
Yeah, definitely. I like the GitHub approach too. It definitely shows that like you have a GitHub, but some managers may or may not look at them. Just people get busy, but a lot of times it's like if you're interested in a project and then you're having a conversation with folks. So this is going past kind of what you're saying, Marcus, is like once you've landed the interview, what you really look for is like the details. How do I know that you finished a project or that you thought through a project? Well, you start to, folks will actually start to probe, and then they'll see if you actually know kind of the space in the space well, because they'll ask you, what are the problems you encountered? And if you stay very high level, people may or may not think, did this person actually complete this project or did they just take it off Kaggle, right? Very different walking yourself through the problem and going through the same paths of like, while you may have done a project, a really good question that you'll be asked is like, what would you have done differently? Mm-hmm. And the reason for that question is really like, did you really go through the project? Because chances are you thought 6 ways to Sunday of how like you could have made it better. And if you have, those details, people really get a feel for that you're passionate about the area and that you really kind of did your homework for them. And it's a really nice feeling when you interview a candidate and it's like they've done all this work for you. Okay, we have a few more questions. Thanks for the input. So Calvin asked Claire, how can you prepare how different interviewers can be from one company to another or one manager to another? And what's the best way to prepare for the variety of different things an interview can cover? Wow, I really like that question. Take it away, Claire.
Yeah, I'm going to address the first part first. So really, how do you prepare for interviewers who may be different from one company to another? So you're interacting with, you're experiencing different company culture here and different mindsets. And I think it's all about what is your vibe. Just be authentic, bring your true self to the table. And you might find that you have really natural conversations and fit with that interviewer, or you might feel like you don't, and just trust your instinct on that one. We all want to end up in a position or role where we really feel like we fit in. We're surrounded by people who support us. So I think really just kind of trying to read the room there and making sure, try to get a gauge of what their working style might be and if that's a good fit for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And so one of the things just to note, Calvin, is like, you won't know everything. So the whole point of the interview is like, there's so many different types. You might get a hacker rank test one time and then just a pure technical, like present a project the next time. And you might get a little bit of like, oh my God, it might feel overwhelming at first, but just realize that's normal and you're not supposed to know everything, because if you've ever had an interview and you go through it and then they give you 3 questions and you get a little flustered with it because it's like a very minute piece of information that you wish you would have studied like 20 minutes before. But just realize that's normal and that's okay, because sometimes interviewers will ask questions that you're not supposed to know the answer to. And the whole reason is they just want to see you problem solve. So I think, don't stress out if you feel overwhelmed. But what I will say is go through the basic concepts and then, learn how to answer. Getting good at answering questions you don't know becomes a skill over time. So definitely that's the way I would approach it. I don't think you can, like when you're in university, you can't study the entire textbook, but try to learn the bigger concepts, and then you can draw, conclusions or answers kind of from there.
Yeah, I mean, I want to weigh in on that one a little bit too, because I feel like we might a little bit over index on like the leak code and the hacker rank. Don't beat yourself up too much with those kinds of practice. I think it's totally valuable. Do it. But the way I think about this is like math is a language, coding is a language. And if you speak this language, you have this ability to learn anything in this field that's going to be put in front of you. And so just be confident in that ability. Like if you understand the core concepts within mathematics, we can put a new machine learning model out there and you're going to figure it out. You're going to understand the inner workings of how that model works. You're going to be able to think about how to apply it to different use cases. So I think it's really showing that ability to use languages that you have already to learn new tools.
Yep. Okay, so Ganesh asked, how do you write clean and reproducible Python code? All right, so this one is, I would say data scientists are very guilty of maybe this one. And so maybe we're getting a little into the software realm, but Claire, if you want to take this one.
I think, so thinking of in the context of an interview here, if you find yourself in a coding interview and you're writing some Python code, you're under pressure, and we can all write a lot of messy lines of code and run a couple lines in a Jupyter notebook and iterate a little bit and get to the answer that we want. But we also want to showcase that we know how to structure that code, because when you're in that live interview, you're really kind of showing how you use code to brainstorm as a tool. But we also want to demonstrate how we would then take that code into production and make sure it's reliable, reproducible, tested. And so what I've done here is, if I don't have time in that interview to write some reproducible Python code, which you probably don't, it's probably like 45 minutes, 60 minutes, talk to your interviewer about how you would take this project into the next steps. Like, okay, I've got this linear regression model, it's predicting X, Y, Z. We've got some messy code in a notebook. What would be my process to clean this up? How would I want to format it? What best practices would I follow? How would I unit test it? And while you're coding, like, do your best to just like rely on best practices, like understand object-oriented programming and really how to structure things as you go.
Yep.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, definitely a tough one. But the really good news about that one, Ganesh, is like it's very well established how to write good code. And so contextually, the way I think about it, a lot of data scientists start off, or machine learning engineers start off with the math first, and then you learn how to use notebooks, and eventually that's great, but you have to know how to productionize these things. And, you know, because that's when you're delivering value to the business. But the good news is a lot of this is established, a lot of the best coding practice. One of my favorite references is, if you've ever heard of Uncle Bob, he's the author of Clean Code and Clean Architecture. I think his name is like Robert Martin, but everybody calls him Uncle Bob. Amazing place to learn how to write really good, clean, productionizable code. Okay, so Roman, what are some concrete question types on the interview process? How are they different compared to a standard software engineering loop? Okay, this is a good one. Claire, take us away.
Ooh, kind of depends on what you're interviewing for. So we're looking at software engineer here. There's going to be some hands-on coding probably. Maybe I would expect maybe an architecture design session. Maybe you're sitting in front of a whiteboard or a virtual whiteboard. And there might be some hands-on coding or a coding take home. So those are kind of the concrete interview sessions I would expect. And in terms of like the questions, typically for like architecture, like design, you might be given a problem to solve. Like, let's say, for example, like how would I design a automated retraining loop for my models in production? What tools would I use? What data needs to flow where? So that might be a good example of a question you might be asked. And then coding, I don't know, it varies. That's really hard to nail down. It kind of varies on the role, but you will probably be asked questions about projects you've worked on in the past, maybe specific approaches that you tried, what model worked the best, how many models did you test against each other, how did you test the models against each other, why did you choose this model, not that model? Those are really common ones that I definitely would be prepared to answer for your past projects.
Yep, 100% agree there with Claire. And I think like when I break down that question, I just see like a Venn diagram in my brain, and it's like the software engineering interview is like you know, that one you're pretty straightforward with. It's like, can you code? Do you know design patterns? Can you write good, clean code? Conceptually, when I see software engineers, and you know, I love whenever you get like a data science candidate who's been a software engineer, because it means they get the foundational stuff and they can productionize things, and they're just very capable inside of a business. They can just build an application or use some sort of, you know, they're probably good in some sort of cloud platform, whether it's GCP or AWS, but they generally can get things done very capably. Where I do see like a very important thing to focus on if you're a software engineer coming into the data science or machine learning realm, is really understanding data and how you can make that work for the business. So some things you may be asked would be like some statistics questions, or like, hey, what's what is drift in a machine learning model, or what is, how do we measure the performance of this model? How do we know if things are affecting our model? How would you build value? What's the right type of algorithm so that, the value you bring as a software engineer to a company is like you're a builder, and that's your value, is like you're automating things out. I think the value you bring as a data scientist, as a machine learning engineer, is really, how can I make the data that we have produce some sort of, large business impact? And so when you think about it from those two realms, I think having a background, Roman is a software engineer from, a background in software engineering is really great. And so what I would focus on if I was coming from that world is really, how do I make data more valuable rather than, automating processes or, design patterns, like things like that, etc. All right, Claire, you can ask this next question if you want. You can.
Yeah. So from Phuc Ming, what is the pay range for ML engineers, data scientists with 10 years of experience? What a great question. Here's the thing. You're going to be fine. The pay range is high. It's hard to put a real range on that one, but it's a lot. That's a great amount of experience, and you should definitely be compensated for that.
Yeah, definitely. Going a little deeper into that question, I think the pay range is like, it can really range from, 100,000 to many hundred thousands. It depends the tier that you're at, where you're working.
So the company, like small, large enterprise.
Yeah. Are you trading that pay range for equity, things like that, if you're in the startup realm? So the answer to that question is it depends, but I kind of want to go a little deeper on like, maybe what are the things that you can do to increase that pay range? And so right off the bat, what I'm thinking is, one thing that I think ML practitioners and data scientists can do much better of is really selling themselves. And when I say sell, I don't mean like used car salesman type selling. I mean like really communicating with the other person, like, who you are, what value you bring, and why they should pay a premium for you. Claire, in your experience, have you, what are the things that really make a candidate stand out, that you're just like, oh my God, I have to have this person. They're asking for a higher salary, but, and then you're like, we can, what are the things that you look for to make somebody, to justify that kind of pay bump?
Yeah, I mean, there's a term that we've been throwing around within Arize, and I think it's kind of catching on. AI ROI, so return of investment on AI projects. And what really stands out and really justifies the salaries that we're making today is how much value we're bringing to the business and how we're measuring that in terms of business value. Like I can look at my model accuracy, F1 score, RMSE, whatever you got, but how does that actually tie to what we're trying to optimize for the business, and what returns have we brought to the business? And so when I see those kinds of metrics on resumes, that's just money. That's amazing to see. It's an indication of how much value you're going to bring to this next opportunity, and it can definitely give you a leg to stand on.
Yeah, you can add value to the business, but also the team. I think whenever you see someone with extremely strong leadership capabilities and strong technical skills, you can think both a player and a coach. Those types of people are far and few in between. And if they're a really great culture fit, they're very supporting and they help others. It's really hard to pass up on candidates like this. And so, one really good question I wanted to ask you, Claire, from Ram Prasanna is, as someone who is an early kind of in their DSML kind of journey, how do they stay up to date on specific areas? We kind of both know that with everything from generative, ChatGPT, Cohere, Anthropic, all that stuff, it's really hard to stay up to date. So what are some of the areas that, what are some of the tools or things that you do to stay up to date?
Yeah, I mean, Ram, this is the $1 million question. I wish I had the perfect answer, but I think it's we're working in such a fast-paced growing industry. So I think number one is just like knowing that this is the industry for you. Do you want to be in an industry where we don't have all the answers, or do you want to be in an industry where there are answers and you can learn to execute that? So finding that we're all here, I think we like uncertainty. I think we like bringing solutions. So staying on top of things is really going to be key here. And because it's growing so quickly, it's difficult. So a couple things that I do personally is I set aside some time, like in the morning, in the evening, just to catch up in the community. Again, not to plug it again, but MLOps community Slack channel is amazing. I just kind of cruise those channels and see what people are talking about. I also listen to podcasts. This is something you can multitask. I do it while I'm doing dishes, that kind of stuff. Really just to hear like what are the latest topics, hear those kind of casual conversations people are having in the industry. And then if you're really trying to jump into different areas, maybe if you're working in a certain area, but you want to learn something about what might not be something you get to work on every day in your current role, personal projects are great. I know it can take a little bit of extra time, but even maybe finding some people in the community to like collaborate with you on it. If, for example, you really want to move into like personalization algorithms, but you've been in NLP, just get some open data and put together a recommender system and get it out on your GitHub. And now you're showcasing that you already have hands-on experience there.
Yep, I really like the time blocking part of that, Claire. I do the same thing. So some of the areas that I've heard, how do you stay up to date? Everything from Twitter, LinkedIn. I personally have like an email service. It's called like the TLDR newsletter. Also to making time to read, research if you want to see what the latest progressions are at the Precipice YouTube channels. There's really a bunch of ways to do that. Claire kind of said it best. If you block time out, that 1 hour every day, you'll be better than 90% of the folks. 1% better every day kind of thing. Okay, Ozan, as an experienced lead softie with proficiency in coding, do you recommend any online courses or learning tracks that can help me develop further skills? Maybe I'll take this one. I personally have a favorite, but like it's biased because I use it. But there's plenty out there. But I really liked Data Camp. That was where I made my first journey. I really like the founders. It's like it goes from like a Reddit explain like I'm 5 all the way to very advanced topics. So using all the tools under the sun. I really liked Data Camp personally, but there's many out there, and definitely kind of do your research before investing the time. And then Claire, did you want to answer, or maybe you can ask another question? We're kind of
yeah, I mean, I agree with everything there. I would just recommend like looking for specific things that interest you the most. So if you're like really passionate about deep learning, then kind of find a course that's targeted on that. I think it's still good to have like the general courses as well, but if you find something that's targeted, you'll be able to go deeper there. Gotcha. I think next question that I'm seeing here is, I'm sorry if I can't say your name here, but Pruthvi, this is a really good question. Can we bring this one up? What's your best advice to someone? Is that a, yeah, okay. I'm looking at the right one. Best advice to someone who has 6 years of data analytics experience, just graduated with masters, multiple interests, but struggling to get callbacks because of companies in the current market, or from companies in the current market. Yeah, the market is really, really hard right now. This is something that has been on my mind. How do we really like get that opportunity to even get the interview in the first place? My first question to this one is, or my first answer to this one is going to be your network. I think there's so much value in just putting yourself out there, building a network, communicating with people who might be in the same position, or maybe even like entry-level grads, like even just mentoring other people. You're just building these connections. You never know what might come out of that. And I think for myself, a lot of like next job opportunities has really just come from like people I know, rather than just sending in the cold application. But the other thing I would say on that is also numbers. It is a numbers game. I think for my first 2 roles in data science, I probably was maybe sending out like 200 applications, and I was maybe getting a call back for every 1. So really just the high frequency there. You never know who might be interested in your resume, put it at the top of the stack, and you'll end up on a call with a company and just get to learn more about them. So don't be shy and just applying to everything. Even if you're under or overqualified, you never know what else they might be looking for. So just getting your name out there as much as you can.
Gotcha. Yep. Great response there, Claire. Definitely, we've all been through it. So don't keep your head up and keep going on. Last question, I think, from Marcus is, coming from a different industry, what would you say are the most valuable characteristics? The really cool part about coming from a different industry is that you can critically think in another industry, right? And you understand the problems there. And one advantage is chances are that that industry also probably has data science data problems. There's some sort of data issue there. So you actually you bring domain knowledge. And I think one of the most valuable things that a data scientist can also have is like kind of street smarts business knowledge, right? It's like, how do I deliver value for a business? If you're just always pure in the math and pure in the coding, you can a lot of times lose sight of that. So you might be building a fraud model, but at the end of the day, your goal is to reduce the number of chargebacks for your company, for instance, if you're working in the financial space. So, I think the ability to think outside of your job makes a really great data scientist there, Marcus. So I think we're coming up on time. Thank you so much for joining us for our Observe session here. We hope you learned a ton. Claire, if you want to give any parting words before we...
Yeah, just thanks for the great questions. I know we're right at time here, but it's really great chatting with y'all. Hope this was helpful.
Amazing. All right, everyone have a great day. Enjoy the rest of day 2 at Observe. Thank you so much.
Bye.